everybody. I am so excited to introduce to you Raniah Al-Sayed. Raniah founded Lucid Body London and currently teaches Lucid Body at Italia Conti Academy of Theatre Arts and the Drama Studio London, all in the UK. She trained as an actor, firstly as a young artist at the Brit School, and later at the Michael Howard Studios, New York City, where she met Lucid Body founder Faye Simpson, who currently teaches acting graduate students at the NYU Tisch program. While she continued to act, sometimes write and direct in New York City, she began training to become a Lucid Body teacher. In 2013, Raniah returned to the city of her childhood to found Lucid Body London. Hi, Raniah.
Hello.
The first thing that I want to ask you, for everyone watching that doesn't know, would you mind giving a quick explanation of what Lucid Body is?
Sure. Yes. Firstly, thank you for having me. So what is Lucid Body? It is a movement process, a physical acting process that that asks of an actor that they connect their emotional body and their physical body, using them together with their breath to fully inhabit their characters from a place of emotional and physical truth. And the process involves a lot of self-introspection. So sometimes people describe it as a process of self-development that happens to be a physical acting process. And sometimes people say it's a physical acting process that happens to be self-development. So there's a little bit of both in it. And it draws on lots of different aspects, lots of different strands make up the work. There are inspirations from Meisner, there's inspiration from Buddhism, there's the use of the chakra centers, the 7 energy centers of the body. And all of that sort of intertwines and combines to make this very in-depth process that is largely offered to actors to get in their body.
That's awesome. I've really enjoyed kind of getting to learn more about Lucid Body throughout this year. It's been really great.
I'm really pleased that you connected with it in that way. It's really nice to hear.
Yeah. I'd also like to know what originally drew you to acting. What experiences or training have you found most helpful in getting you where you are?
That's a big question. What drew me to acting? That feels like a really long time ago now. I suppose do you want the short answer or the long answer?
Whichever you want.
So I suppose when I was young, growing up in the UK, I wasn't born in the UK, I was born in the Middle East, but my mother is English, so we were raised here. And I think there was always this sense growing up of a slight otherness, a slight, if you like, a kind of an outsider looking into the world here. And I think I'm the youngest of 3, but I think my older siblings, even more so, felt like those outsiders. And we all spoke English fluently. I don't know if we spoke it with an accent because I don't remember. But I think there was a certain amount of shyness and tentativeness about our interactions in the UK. And it was my mum who sent us to, I think it was a Monday night drama class. And my early memories of it are like making a mask on a paper plate and, you know, running around the room being a lion or whatever. But what was the sustained memory of it is that it was a place where I felt really free to be me without those sort of societal constraints of who are you, what box do you fit in? Because when you're a lion, you're a lion. It doesn't, you know, it just doesn't matter what the rest of it is in you. And I think that sense of freedom and connection to myself it became vital, like a vital energy that I needed to keep finding. And I went through all those usual phases as a kid of like, I want to be a ballerina, and had that dream crushed very quickly at ballet exam number 1, where I couldn't remember any of the positions. And I want to be a detective, and I want to be a this, but ultimately kept coming back to this feeling in drama and in school plays and in any time we were allowed to be imaginative and create these worlds and these characters, this freedom and this sense of being connected to something in me felt like it was unavoidable. So I think I was as young as about 11 when I started saying to my mum, this is what I want to do. And seeking out, Guildhall exams, which maybe doesn't mean anything to an American, but there's sort of like a grade exam for a piano player, but for young actors in the UK. So seeking out exams and seeking out other drama classes, and so it was very early on, and then I made myself determined to get into what I considered to be like the best school for a young actor at the time, and they still exist, and they're still producing great actors and singers, and so I went to the Brit School, and then it was like, well, that's it. I'm obviously going to be an actor. So there you go.
Yeah, I've definitely felt similar ways. I think that might be pretty collective amongst a lot of actors, is kind of being able to feel like truly yourself on stage. I really like that. I know you've had like a really kind of expansive career of doing a lot of different things. So I was wondering what has been the highlight of your career thus far, and on the flip side, what is something you haven't done yet that you hope to accomplish in the future?
Okay. I like the word expansive because that makes it sound really positive. Makes it sound like, yeah, I've done all this stuff. When you're in it, it can feel quite chaotic and like, oh, I'm doing this now, I'm doing that now, I'm doing that. So because I have done lots of different things, there's been acting and there's been teaching and there's been movement directing and more recently intimacy coordination, and it's hard to think like what's the highlight of all of those different strands that have been part of my career. I think in some ways, if you want like a big answer, it's really early on. So when I left the Brit School, I would have been 18, which is super young. It's young certainly in the UK, but with the American school system, it's even younger, right? Because you're just beginning university then. So I had been through a 2-year program because our school system is different here. So I had done 2 years of exclusive actor training. That's all I did for those 2 years. And at the end of that, I formed a theatre company with a couple of allies from the program who I sought out people who I thought, you're incredibly talented. I want to what's that phrase? Hitch my wagon to like I want this, you and me. So a couple of us, 3 initially, and then it quickly became 2 because it's hard to do. We started a theatre company, and we produced a few plays. We wrote them, we produced them, we took them from London to the Edinburgh Festival, and that, I think, I'm trying to think of a word that is not a curse word. The courage of that, the sort of, does the word bolshe mean anything to Americans? It doesn't, does it? It comes from Bolshevik. It comes from the word Bolshevik. It's like having chutzpah. That's the word, right? So the kind of chutzpah of it, that's sort of like, yeah, we're just going to do it. Something about that, I feel like, being so young and manifesting something and really making, however wild and youthful, an artistic vision manifest is deeply thrilling. So that, I guess, would be the big answer. I think the little answer is that all through there are tiny moments, and they might be little fragments, little moments where I help an actor to find their grounding for 5 minutes, and in those 5 minutes that actor transforms and the effect that it has on them. So while that it's not like the marquee headline, it's something about those little moments are tiny little highlights that keep the spirit going.
Yeah, that's a great answer. That sounds really good. And also creating your own theater company, that sounds like such a great experience. Like so much fun.
It was a lot of fun, and it was an enormous amount of hard work, and took a great deal of charity in terms of energy and money from everyone we knew, fundraising and asking people to help make costumes for no money, and enlisting a friend who'd never done it to run a light board, and stuff that stuff that I probably wouldn't do now in my 40s. I'd be like, you should hire someone and pay them appropriately. Also because, well, first of all, it's a long time ago, but because the industry works very differently in London. It's not, the union here is strong in many ways, but some decades ago it was much stronger, and I think the requirements for a small company are very different, even now, are very different in London versus New York. So I remember being in New York for almost a decade and wanting to do something similar, and looking at it and thinking, wow, that's a different ballgame. I think it's achievable, but I think it's maybe not as easy for someone who's artistically minded to also just wrap their head around the sort of administration and the production side of it. Whereas in London, even now, I feel like it's easier for artists to somehow cobble together. I say that with love, because it was also me cobble together a production without needing to be like, I'm an arts administrator or I'm a producer, because there aren't so many hoops to jump through and bits of paperwork to fill out and insurance to find and bonds and this and that. And
yeah, that definitely, I agree. And that leads pretty well into my next question of, I know you've lived in London a really long time, but you also lived in New York for a really long time too. So I'd love to know more about your experience living in New York City, and if you have any advice about living in New York City, I'd love to hear that too.
New York. I miss New York. New York I have beautiful memories of New York, and leaving it felt a bit like leaving a relationship. So whenever people ask me about New York, I sort of, this wistful, slightly rosy glow comes over me of like, oh, my former lover. So I was there for almost a decade, and I moved there after a few years so I grew up in London and I was trained there, and then I moved to Florida, and I finished a degree in Florida. So I did a couple of years at a school there, largely because I realized that in the US it's really hard to make any kind of living wage if you don't have a degree, which is probably truer now in the UK than it used to be. So I was desperate to get back to a big city, because that's what I grew up in, and that feel of that sort of, that buzz, that energy of the big city, I needed it. And so New York seemed like a logical next step, and so I moved there. I would say a fairly young and fairly naive actor, definitely not knowing about the industry there or how it works. My experience of the industry at that point had been solely in the UK, and it is a very different game in New York. What's expected of you, how people network, how people, or even the auditions themselves are conducted differently. The union is different. The expectation, the idea of being a triple threat, it doesn't really exist in the UK in the same way. That you have musical theatre actors, but they're musical theatre actors and they do musical theatre, and then you have legit actors or however you want to call it. You have actors, and they do straight theatre, straight television, and there's not a great deal of crossover. So things like that became like eye-opening to me. Oh, okay, I'm going up against people who can sing and dance, and maybe I'm going up for a season of plays. Again, not common in the UK. So like, now I'm auditioning for a season of things, and within that season there are 2 musicals, and right, so then you're negotiating this very different landscape. And I negotiated that landscape as best I could, going out on auditions, and what did I do initially? I waited tables initially, because that's what you do when you get to New York, right? I didn't know what else to do. I think I was quite lucky in lots of respects with my support jobs. I think I think it was pure luck. I think I just found quite supportive places where I earned enough money that I could actually pay the bills, largely speaking. And I went from waiting tables to bartending and got bored of that, and went back to something I had done years before when I lived briefly in Mexico. I have lived a lot of places, you're right. I taught English for a year living in Mexico, and that became a really useful support job actually for my acting, because it wasn't late night and it wasn't physically draining like bartending or waiting tables can be. And I did all of this for years, that sort of juggle of the actor and the support job. And I can't even remember what your question was. Just being honest, I'll sit and talk about New York for an hour. Was it advice, actual advice, as opposed to just...
Yeah, just your experience and also advice if you have any.
I do have advice. I do, actually. I think New York, like any big city, is really expensive. You need a support job unless you're independently wealthy. If you have support, if you've got financial support from whatever it is, then that makes your life a lot easier in New York. You can commit a vast amount of your time to your artistic career. If you're not in that position, then figuring out how to support yourself in a sustainable way, I think is more important than rushing in and getting your headshots and getting into those auditions immediately. I think that's great, and everybody wants to do that, but actually figuring out how you're going to do that long term, if you want to do it long term, because I think it's not for everybody long term. Maybe you want to spend 5 years or 10 years in New York and then move on and do something else. But I think a long term career in any big city involves like, how do I keep my rent low? How do I pay the rent? How do I not burn out doing my my support job? How do I make enough money but hold enough energy back for my artistic self that I can commit to things? And then I think it's really like it's a numbers game. You have to be able to withstand that life for as long as possible, because in the intervening years, people will leave. They will, like me and lots of others, they'll start a family, and they will not have the time to go out on auditions because they're taking care of a child. They will decide that actually acting's not for them, and they'll go and move into some very different role. Or, a million things happen. So I think the people around me who have a really long and successful career have figured out a way to play the long game. And I don't mean that to sound cynical. I just mean that there has to be some way of sustaining yourself for a very long time to have a career. And that's not solely about money. It's also, I think, about your energy reserves and about your mental health and about how you keep yourself supported. So one of the best things that happened to me in New York, other than finding lucid body, which I found there, was getting involved in, somebody finally figured out the name for it, an accountability group. It was a group of other artists. I think we were between 6 and 8 at any given time, and we would meet weekly on a Thursday morning in a diner, and we would have 1 hour allotted, and we would go around the table, and depending how many people were there, we'd divide up the time, and you'd get 5 or 10 minutes or whatever it was to speak about your week, what you were finding challenging, where your successes were, what you wanted to be held accountable to. I know I've got to get on top of these postcards that we're all sending out now. I don't know if people still do that anymore, but we did when we were in New York. So I've got to get on top of these postcards, and other people would mentally log it. And the following Thursday, someone would say, so did you do anything about postcards in the last week? And it's okay if the answer's no, but it's that keeping people supported and accountable and checking in and being able to go in and say for 10 minutes, just sob and say, I've had the most atrocious week and I feel like I'm failing at this. And for everybody to say, we hear you. And I think that was huge in terms of my mental health and my ability to maintain motivation and a sort of sense of community. I guess community is a big thing. Yeah.
I get that a lot, mixing accountability with self-care and having, levels of both are definitely important for, sustainability.
Right. And the actor's job is so solo. It's so you don't have, unless you have a manager and an agent or both, or somebody who's really got your back, and then even then a manager or an agent, there's also a financial relationship there. But unless you've got that, who's Joe at the office that you're meeting at the water cooler to talk about how it's going, or to vent, or to say, do you think I should go for that promotion? Or we don't have that. So creating that, I think, is really helpful for the actor to not be alone.
Yeah, definitely. We've talked a few times about your work as a teacher. So I'd like to know what you've gained from teaching that has informed your work in theater and the arts in general.
I think it's a hard question for me to answer, because I always assumed that the teaching would really run alongside the acting. And for a while, certainly while I was training, it still did in New York. And very quickly, I brought the work back to the UK. I brought the teaching work to the UK, and I started Lucid Body London, which is like a kind of, I guess it's almost like a franchise. It's like an offshoot, an arm of Lucid Body New York. And that took time to really develop here and to get into drama schools and to develop a student base in London for courses that are not offered as part of the drama school. And as that was happening, I then met my partner and we had a child, and I have a 4-year-old now. So you can sort of scratch out the last 4 years in terms of any extra energy or any extra time in which to be artistic. So how has it informed me as an artist? I suppose it forces me to be brave. Going in and standing in front of a room of 12, sometimes as many as 16 young training actors, and saying, I will lead you through this very deep, very personal process, and I will hold space for you to be in a personal and artistic transformation, requires a lot of grounding, a lot of a lot of, not self-confidence as in like an ego, but being able to just hold the space and say, I've got you, you're safe, you're under control. I think that's changed very much a sense of self-assurance, or a sense of my ability to hold space, which I don't know that I was always that great at as an actor. You know, for me, stepping into an audition room was always a very, very fearful thing. Now, I haven't done it in many years, so it would be interesting to go back and see what happened now if I reverted back to that nervous actor place, or if the teacher version of me could walk in the room being really confident that actually I'm allowed to take up space and I don't have to minimize my energy or apologize for my artistic expression. And my students definitely keep me on my toes and they keep me honest, if you know what I mean. It's like, I can't fake it. If I fake something in the room, they smell it, they know, and then I see it offered back to me. So if I give them something that's if I demonstrate something for them and it's not connected, the entire room will give me back something that's not connected, and then I'm like head in hands, that because I know it's my fault, right? So I have to go back and be like, okay guys, you have to stop, my bad, let's do that again, let me show you again. And then I have to really get connected and very very honest and very generous. And I have to, in those moments of demonstrating the work at the top of my game, so that I set the bar up there for them. And then I've got to drop back into teacher mode. So it's really this sort of acrobatic thing of like, I'm doing the best that I can do in terms of offering it as an actor, and now I come back and hold you. And I think, I like to think that when, I'm saying when because I'm feeling really hopeful about it today, that when I get back to acting and when I get back to creating in that way, that hopefully that bar that I have to keep setting for them is where I can return to. That's what I hope.
Yeah, I like that a lot, and it seems like it's been really beneficial to both you and your students, which is really great.
Gosh, I hope so.
It definitely seems it. One of the last actual questions is, what advice would you give to someone who wants to make a career in the arts?
Well, I suppose that's a lot the same as what I've said about New York, about the idea of sort of longevity and about support. And all three of the children in my family, so my two siblings and I, we are all in the arts in different mediums, and we all have very different careers. And I think what each one of us has realized over the years and tried to impart to one another is that there isn't one path. I think often there feels like there is. I think often artists feel like, well, there is making it, and that's it. And you've got your idea of what making it is, but what Brenna's idea of making it isn't Raniah's idea, but we're not always sharing that. And so there's this kind of this perception that everybody feels like, well, there's one thing that is the actor, one thing that makes you the musician. And actually, there isn't any one path. You choose a path that suits your needs, that works for you, that feels fulfilling for you. And I think if you want a lifetime in the arts, it's finding different pathways. So for a while, maybe you are, the talk of the town. Maybe you're, flying off Broadway. You're like, you're about to hit the big and maybe that happens for you and maybe it doesn't. But then when those shifts happen, not assuming that it's a failure or that somehow that's the end of the career, but that actually it's a shift. And one year you might make loads of film, and the next year all that film is gone. Well, that's okay. Where are you shifting to now? And I think finding those sort of tacks and seeing them as shifts rather than an end can be really helpful. And I think being true to yourself. Who was it? There was Lily Tomlin, I think, talked about this, about being really true to you, almost like your artistic compass or your moral compass, taking work that feels right to you. So not trying to crowbar yourself into other people's idea of what the career should be. If your thing is to write a one-woman show or a one-man show and tour that for 20 years, if that's what makes you happy and that's what you want as your artistic career, well then great. And if you want to do back-to-back commercial work and that's what fulfills and sustains you, do it. Instead of, I think for me early on, I felt like there was a lot of pressure in terms of what making it was. And actually, I feel like there was time wasted for me where I look back and think, gosh, I could have used that time to do something very different that perhaps wouldn't have been like you're the big name on whatever, but it would have been fulfilling. And it would have been sustaining. My soul would have been nourished by it, and I would have been able to offer something artistically rather than kind of like slamming up against the wall of someone else's expectation of what it means to be an actor. I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, I really get that. That's pretty similar to why we're doing this video series, is to kind of show, hopefully, the listeners that there's so many different ways to have a career in the arts, and like just doing what feels right to you may not be what you originally thought. So I think that answer makes a lot of sense. Thank you. That was really great. This is a fun question. We like to have it in here because it's fun. What makes you happy? And that can be just anything. It doesn't have to relate to theater.
Cups of tea make me very happy on a regular basis, hence me having tea. What makes me happy? Well, today so we're in a pandemic. That's not news to anyone. That would be bad if that was a shocker. That was the first time somebody found out. Sorry guys, to let you know, we're in a pandemic. So, it's been tough in the UK. There's been a lot of lockdowns. There's been a lot of restrictions on what we can and can't do, as I'm sure you've been experiencing. And I think it's been really stifling for artists. And we've been doing as best we can in terms of drama schools. And I've continued to teach stuff online and sometimes going in person. But I haven't worked on a play in person, I think, for over a year. I think today, for the first time in the morning, I got to go into a rehearsal space as their movement director with a really lovely group of third-year actors at Italia Conti, and I about cried because it's like, oh, we're in a space, we're gonna make something. It's surprisingly really joyous. I was, for a woman whose career is now about linking the emotional and the physical body, I was surprisingly unaware of how much I had missed it. People kept talking about the longing to be, on social media, people I'm connected to post about how much they've been longing to make work and be in the studio. And I was thinking, I miss it, but actually I'm okay. I'm very busy with my child, and my child brings me unending happiness and joy. But then somehow walking into the space today, felt really joyous. So creating things, my son brings me vast joy, cups of tea, being in nature. I hugged a tree recently. I did hug a tree. I try not to, because who hugs trees? But it felt necessary, and I was with another artist, and I knew she'd understand about the need to. So we hugged a tree. It felt really good. Family, friends. I think, yeah, connection, I guess, is what I'm describing. Connection to my family, to my loved ones, to nature, to people artistically. I suppose that's what I love, connection.
Yeah, I love that. That's so great. Connection is just awesome. I want to kind of end this session. Is there anything that you want to add that you think we would be incomplete without knowing?
I should have something really witty to say, shouldn't I? I don't. I don't have anything witty to say right now. I think that the arts is truly a deeply important part of our society. In moments where I have felt really desperate, and I sort of have a vision of myself in New York at some point, weeping, perhaps on the phone to my mother, what am I doing? Why am I trying to do this? And getting into that spiral of like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe this is not a useful thing to do in the world. Maybe there is some better use for my energy. And my mum saying to me, she's a wise woman, saying to me, but it's necessary. Art is necessary for civilization. Without art, who does humanity become? And I know that during the pandemic, it's been made very clear who the sort of essential workers are. I don't know if you guys have these same phrases that we have in the UK. So we've had essential workers, key workers, things like that. And essential workers, obviously doctors, nurses, scientists, people developing vaccines and keeping us protected and safe and healthy. All of that is essential in terms of our day-to-day living, as are people who work in supermarkets, we've discovered, supermarket workers and postal workers. And I don't think that in the same sort of day-to-day immediate way that artists are key workers. Like, I don't consider myself an essential worker. The person who makes sure I have bread to eat, and the person who makes sure that I've got antibiotics when I need it, or who gave me my vaccine, they're essential in that day-to-day immediate way right now. But in that broader picture of what civilization is, I think that the artist, whether it's the actor, the singer, the painter, I think the artist is what elevates us into what we are so proud of as humans, this idea of a civilization, as opposed to just like a group of animals, because we are animals, but right, a group of animals. But art is what elevates us. And I don't know anyone who doesn't enjoy, in some quite deep way, some form of art, perhaps finding it transformative or cathartic or inspiring, thought-provoking in some way, whether it's a painting or a play or a film or a song. And so I think that whatever you choose to do with your art, even having studied it, there is something in that of tapping into that really magical thing that distinguishes humans in our societies. And I think we should all remember that when we feel like, why am I doing this? That's why you're doing it, because we need it.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's so awesome to hear. Thank you so much. This has been really, really helpful. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I've really enjoyed getting to listen to your answers.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to me waffle on.